Welcome back. That's right, it's time to go beyond with VHS Beyond. It's that time of year where I sit down over a weekend, indulge in the latest VHS entry, and I get to tell you which ones are the best, which ones are just okay, hopefully done in a timely enough manner that YouTube doesn't sink all of my videos lower into the algorithm. 2024 has been a wild year for horror already with the likes of The Substance, Longlegs, Inner Violent Nature, I Saw the TV Glow. It has offered up some of the best scares, basically of the decade, and some incredible cinematic moments that I cannot implore you enough to see all of those films, frankly, if you're a fan of horror. Sure, there's been a lot of garbage this year. I was going to do a review on The Strangers Chapter 1, or Part 1, or whatever the hell it's called, because it was just, frankly, one of the worst things I've ever seen. But it's also pretty great to see original and independent films doing really, really great in the horror genre. That being said, Hollywood has decided to go, in a different direction, with a few exceptions like Alien Romulus, Quiet Place Day 1, which have hit it out of the park, frankly. But yeah, it's kind of tough seeing what's coming out of Hollywood compared to, I would say, some great work from independent horror filmmakers. Just like last year, we're following the same rules, including the framing narrative into the rating and rankings this year. You'll see why, obviously, when we get to that part. Like every year, let's start with the criteria for how these rankings work, which is important to me, not only as a YouTuber, but also as a horror fan and a moviegoer to see why I'm judging these short films the way that I'm judging them. Criterion 1 is spooks. How scary is it? Does it stick with me? Does it fill me with some dread? Is this more than just a bunch of jump scares and cliches and things that would typically frighten a child rather than, an adult horror fan? Criterion 2, creativity. What makes this segment original, memorable, and fun? What do I love about it that makes me think beyond the realm of just this surface level scares and maybe a few little creepy moments? Criterion 3, authenticity. Does this fit the era? Does it fit the VHS franchise? Do I feel like this is a lost VHS tape that's just been found in some rubble? Would this be a piece of found footage that I would actually probably be willing to accept, or is it just a bunch of After Effects and filters that have just been thrown over the top of pretty clean footage? And finally, Criterion 4, execution. Does the production team, director, and the special effects artist bring something new to the table, or have we seen this all before? Did this segment fulfill my expectations? Did I want more of it, or did it kind of overstay its welcome? I know it's all very, very subjective, but then again, these are my rankings. If you've got your own, pop them in the list down the bottom how you would rank them. I always love reading them. Makes me feel like we're part of a little community here. Oh, and also, thanks to all the people who keep following my Letterboxd. After you watch these segments, you can actually see where I'm ranking these films at the end of this video, or you can just kind of skip it and then just go to that. But please don't. Please watch the whole video. Before we start, obviously, there's some spoilers ahead, and there was a lot of strobe lighting in this film. I'm gonna try to cut out as much as possible. But then again, look, I highly recommend, just like every year, that you watch this film, support the great talents behind the film. Obviously, it drives people to Shudder, and Shudder's a pretty great service. They don't sponsor me. They don't give me any money. I just think Shudder's really, really great to see a lot of great original content and films. Services like Shudder, Nebula, and Dropout keep the big streamers on their toes and actually innovate and show more great original work, and I highly support that. I gotta say, this year, I felt like I didn't get my money's worth compared to previous VHS entries, but let's get into that. It's time for VHS Beyond, ranked and reviewed. Number 6, Stalk. Well, this might be the weakest first segment we've had in the VHS franchise since maybe VHS 2 with Phase 1 clinical trials. I didn't love this. I will go into why, but let's just start with the setup. Really simple. There's an organization called Warden. They're basically like monster cops. They're trying to track down a creature. It's taken one of the recruits' children or a baby or something. They've got a rookie. He's filming the whole thing. Why? It's not really super clear, but it's basically to capture their kills on tape. It's a nice little setup, but unfortunately, the execution is weak as hell. While filled with fun, gory practical moments and some amazing makeup effects, this took me out so quickly that I had so many problems with this thing. The writing is really, really terrible. The jump scares are just completely unearned. The blood is largely digital, which I just hated so much. Also, the use of extra diegetic music in this sucks so bad. And honestly, I don't know who likes this kind of music. I don't know if horror fans connect with this kind of stuff. This like almost sounds like droning, pumping music. And it's always like the most cliched sounding artless bullshit I've ever heard. There's also way too many angles to kind of keep focused on it. I do like the use of body cams. We have kind of seen that in the past, but like this is just, it just cuts to stuff so often that it's honestly distracting. It does feel like it sets up thematically what VHS Beyond wants to do, but there's like this real confusion between, are they aliens, are they zombies, but they kind of both, but it's mainly aliens. And then it just feels like it was tacked on to the VHS franchise more than anything else. Like, it's not
great, but I will say it's fun. There are some truly great moments in there, and I think that the camera work and the cinematography, especially with the lighting, and a lot of the production design here is pretty fantastic, but a lot of it we've seen before. Again, I really had fun with how it was kind of set up, but they do get to things pretty quickly, which at least it kind of doesn't overstay its welcome. I just have to say, like, I implore anybody who's watching the VHS franchise just to watch this to show you how not to do dialogue. Every single line is the weirdest way to deliver exposition or reasoning, or just to kind of like set up some of the plot, but it's done in the most cliche possible. And I'm not gonna blame the actors for this. They were clearly doing the best with what they had, but just time and time again, it felt like you were playing a game of like D&D or like any other tabletop, and like every single character was like this tough, grim, dark, like I've got to be like the hardest core dude ever. But it's just cops. It's just cops fighting monsters, and I don't know. They felt like they were trying to set up like a franchise kind of thing, but it just felt really weak. It's not great. It's a bit of fun, and I'm giving Stalk a 5 out of 10. Number 5, Fur Babies. This was something. I liked Fur Babies a lot. Up until a certain point, I think Fur Babies is pretty great. I love the setup for this. The fact that Christian and Justin Long are joining the VHS franchise was truly a joy to see. While I don't think I've seen anything from either of them as filmmakers, I just know that Justin has really helped along independent horror for the last decade, and frankly, anytime he's in a horror film, he's killing it. He's fucking great at it. That being said, Fur Babies is basically just Tusk, but with dogs. If you don't know, Justin Long was in Tusk. He's great in it. It's horrifying. I'm sorry I'm spoiling some of it right now, but it's a good film. It's one of Kevin Smith's good films from the last decade. Highly recommend it. But this is kind of just Tusk, but with dogs. It's constructed with a found footage framework, and I think the effects work is a little bit better than Tusk, but at the end of the day, it's something I've seen before. I feel like there was so much here with the setup that I really loved and I really enjoyed, and it was creepy up until a certain point where it became cliche, and the execution left so much to be desired. We know that Justin loves being in something that's a little bit cheekier, a little bit sillier, and a little bit of a blend between horror and comedy, and I do think the comedic moments hit harder than the more horrific moments, but I do think Fur Babies has a bit too much of a cliche opening and middle, but the ending, it just doesn't hit for me. I think it also shifts its angles a little bit too much. Like, it doesn't really matter that Bo is filming some of this stuff because she's got this other like arts and crafts filming segment here. Like, I do think it is a solid VHS entry. It's just not my favorite. That being said, I will say all of the practical makeup and digital effects were amazing, and I loved it. I really felt like that is here in spades, and it actually probably has one of the most gruesome moments in the whole franchise, with the dogs digging here near the end of the film, and I liked it. And also showing the creature's paws, fucked up, brilliant. Felt like throwing up the whole time. Loved it. I also will say the MVP of this segment, and possibly for all of VHS Beyond, is Libby Letlow. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She is fantastic. She's a more subdued Annie Wilkes from Misery. She's even got the haircut, he's a side-by-side. But the devotion and the disturbed nature that she just flips on a dime is fucking brilliant. I loved it from beginning to end. She hits this character with every single note and just nails it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it so much. Just this singular moment here where she discovers the camera on the dog, it's so great. It looks like she's staring into your soul. I loved it. I loved it so much. It's so hauntingly brilliant, and again, one of the best characters possibly in the whole franchise, genuinely. Again, I think overall, Fur Babies let me down because it is very surface level, and again, I have seen some of this stuff before, and even though it delivers on its more grotesque and funnier moments, there's just so much more I kind of wish it did. I will say the ending is weak, but the epilogue with the porch pirate here, I think it's better than the ending we actually got. Like, the stuff with the humane activists, it's great, it's like a wraparound thing, but frankly, I just wish there was more, and I wish I could give it a higher score, but I can't. There are others that are a bit more deserving, and so I give Fur Babies a 6.5 out of 10. Number 4, Dream Girl. I truly love that the more the VHS franchise expands, the more we get to see of their fucked up world reflected in our very, very own. Virat Pal and Evan Dixon really knocked out of the park with Dreamgirl, and I really would love to see more from both of them. As someone who's only really recently got into Indian cinema and learning more about Bollywood and kind of what their essentially industry is like, there's so much about Dreamgirl that fits into the realm of Indian culture and its obsession with its lead stars, and especially how it treats its actresses. And again, this is coming from a white guy who barely has any knowledge on this, but it felt so real in some moments that it was great to see a VHS segment not only from the perspective of a paparazzi, but also something that just felt so fun and brilliant and gory and awful, and I really liked it. It had a similar vibe to the likes of like Perfect Blue, and to a lesser extent, Black Mirror's segment from last year's Season 6's Maisie Day. I really liked Dreamgirl. To explain some of it, as we move through the streets of Mumbai with Arnab and Sonu, who were paparazzi who were tracking down a brand new star, Tara, you start to feel the stress and the rising tensions. I loved the dialogue and the exposition, how it was delivered. It felt natural. It felt great. All of the actors were just doing their job and fucking nailing it. I really have to say that, well, like with all good international VHS segments, this is the kind of short that you could just totally turn the subtitles off and you would have an awesome time. You would understand everything that was happening because the visual language that they were employing just tells a story that is so great. And if a little bit simple and cliched at times, it was really great to see it kind of build on its own little world. That being said, while I don't love the fact that they kind of cut around some of these angles and they just straight up show a dance number in the middle of it, it does still feel like it's in the same kind of realm. I did love how it was like integrated into the backstory and the storyline and what Tara really was, even if I didn't entirely understand what kind of creature she was. Like, clearly she was an alien, like I got that part of it. But at the end, when she goes full Carrie and starts singing and playing the song in the background, it was haunting. It was just absolutely fantastic to see how so much of it was integrated all together, and it was just fun. It was a fun part to watch. I think that the only thing that lets Dreamgirl down is that there are a few moments that don't fit the found footage style. Like I mentioned before, the whole showstopper part. It felt like Virat was showing off his directing chops. He was like, yeah, I can make this cool horror segment, this little short film, but I could probably join the ranks of like some of the best Indian filmmakers out there. And I believe it. I was like, okay, yeah, this is great. And in the middle of a VHS film, it was great. So yeah, while it does have a few cliche moments, and I'm not entirely sure what Tara was, I think it's great. It's satirical, it's fun, it shows kind of this mixture of fame and film and power, and I did see The Substance last week, so maybe I'm a little bit biased on that. There are some great gory moments that truly rival anything in the VHS franchise, and especially even in VHS Beyond. I won't show all of it here, because the best moments kind of happen during the strobe sequence and after it, and I don't want it to affect my viewers, but I just loved it. I really enjoyed Dreamgirl. At the end of the day, it reminded me kind of like a mix between Siren and kind of building its own mythology around the Bollywood stuff, and it's like, it doesn't matter. It's a global story of like fame and power destroying people, both literally and figuratively in this sense. I'm really looking forward to digging into Virat Pal and what he's done previously and what he does in the future. And while it wasn't my favorite segment, I do give Dreamgirl a 7 out of 10. Number 3. Abduction. Anyone who's watched this channel for more than a year or two knows that I am terrified of aliens. It's pretty simple childhood fear. It's irrational, and I fucking hate it. I don't like that I share this knowledge publicly, but also I specifically hate the Greys. I just fuck them. I hate them. I hate how they look. I know why evolutionarily we don't like them, and I know that they're not real. I hope they're not real. Not for a second. And frankly, if they are real, I hope they crash land in the ocean and fucking drown, and their bodies never recovered, and nobody cares about them. That being said, when VHS Beyond was announced and they said, oh, we're gonna go full sci-fi, and I saw the trailer, and I was like, oh man, I'm so amped for this. I cannot wait to be creeped the fuck out on a scale that has frankly been unheard of in this franchise. I am ready. Then I watched the movie. I didn't feel that creeped out. I actually just kind of felt fairly whelmed about VHS Beyond overall, and we'll get into that later on, but the wraparound section, Abduction, was pretty great, and the thing that I truly enjoyed about it was how reflective and meta this entire segment was. It was so good to see that we've had this franchise for over a decade, and the VHS series overall has been a great evolution of what internet culture has done with the found footage genre and the people who play in it. I think to watch this franchise evolve from a group of young filmmakers, young upstarts who now essentially rule Hollywood and the horror world. Without these type of directors like David Bruckner and the guys who'd helped create the Scream franchise, the Chad Man Robs of the world, and people like Adam Wingard, the world of cinema would not be where it is right now. And I think that it's quite amazing. From VHS to VHS Beyond, the horror world would frankly not be the same. They started out with simple CGI and practical effects that one can only imagine how the latest freshmen from this and VHS 85 might end up being the future of horror in cinema as we move through this post-AI, post-actors and writers strike renaissance. I think films, especially horror films, are going to have a level of authenticity and a level of production that is going to be more human and is going to fight back against this kind of, what some would say, a digital revolution, which I personally don't like and have not seen anything good come out of it so far. I think it was fascinating to see such a fun setup really go wholeheartedly into the future. If you think about it, we kind of haven't had a modern look on the VHS franchise since VHS Viral. And it does try to stick the landing. It does try to set this in 2021. I know Stalker's set in 2023, but it does really try to create a wraparound story that strings all of this together in a way that doesn't feel too cliched and is ultimately about showing the future and obviously the way that the VHS franchise feels about sci-fi and how it's been captured by the found footage franchise. It hasn't done a lot with it. The thing that I can only think off the top of my head was Oren Pelly's Area 51, and that didn't do super great considering he started one of the most beloved found footage franchises, and we haven't really seen sci-fi taken to a level in found footage that is the kind of heights that, say, Paranormal Activity has. What I really loved about this segment was the fact that it uses so much real world and fake footage together that it does blend in this mockumentary style that I truly enjoy. There are some little moments like the way that this title works on this YouTuber's account, the way that the VHS franchise has essentially said, hey, we get that we can do this in a lo-fi style and for a low budget, but we are, at the end of the day, still trying to make it look like a high-concept horror film. While, look, I could be alone in this, the VHS franchise overall is kind of looking back at itself and says like, hey, we kind of kept this thing going. We brought this back to life after it honestly could have died back in the 2010s with the likes of the Paranormal Activity franchise or films like As Above, So Below. But ultimately, there's two things that I don't love about Abduction. While their mockumentary stylings helped bring a level of believability and help kind of create a thematic through line through this entire film, the thing that really let it down was the ending and the introduction of the Corridor Digital guys. And look, I used to be a big fan of theirs, and then they did this AI animation bullshit, and I'm glad that they've pumped the brakes on this. Like, I went and checked their channel recently, and it's nice that they're not doing as much of that bullshit as anymore. It's the kind of shit that is honestly killing the filmmaking industry and animation as a whole, and I don't support it, and it fucking sucks, and I'm sorry to get kind of political in this stuff, but I do like that they bring a level of authenticity, and that they work essentially as a way to push the franchise into a modern selection, which makes me feel like they are going to do some more modern sequels after VHS Beyond. That being said, as much as I would have loved to have been scared and freaked out by a lot of the stuff in Abduction, the ending is incredibly weak. And while I think it has a great setup, and I think that the way that they break it up in these segments, and they kind of introduce the thing like, oh, maybe it's ghosts, but maybe it's aliens, and this guy who's clearly like just dealing with the most fucked up shit ever. He looks like he hasn't slept in months. I do like the fact that this is continuing the franchise's way, that it's integrating the wraparound segments into the films a lot more organically. It's very spooky and it has some very, very tense moments. I just didn't like the ending that much. There is something in it that I think is trying to tie itself into a different segment, and we'll get into that later on. But ultimately, Abduction wasn't that great, but I still had fun with it. I still liked the meta-narrative of it. I still thought that bringing in this kind of YouTuber mockumentary kind of segments was fun, and obviously I related to that as somebody who makes video essays and stuff online and really likes scary material online and found footage online. But ultimately, I have to give Abduction a 7 out of 10.
Number 2, Stowaway. Stowaway is fantastic. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. It is a fascinating push forward for VHS and VHS Beyond that I was just not expecting. To start off with the basics, the story is about Hayley, played by YouTuber and Australian writer and voice actor Ilana Pierce. She is a ufologist who is tracking lights in the sky after what sounds like she ditched her husband and I think her child as well. It's very subtle, but I think that's what's happened, essentially. Unfortunately, things go from pretty fucking awful to truly the worst situation ever as she stumbles upon an alien craft that she's been chasing for some time. It feels like the segment is set in what looks like the late 90s or early 2000s. It's kind of hard to tell with the fashion and the tech, but honestly, it feels so authentic, and I really love how Pierce portrays Hallie as just someone who has truly run away from her life and is trying to prove something to people who you kind of get a sense of has wronged her. There's clearly like so much unresolved shit with this character that she's not processing well, and that she's using the hunt for UFOs and filming her findings as like a sense of a search of truth. And it really comes across great in just these little monologues and this little dialogue that she has with these random people. There are so many oddly beautiful and uncomfortable moments in this thing that just you have to sit with, that I will say does not gel with the entire VHS franchise, but I think it is trying to show, and I hate to use this as a cliche because it is the title, it is showing what VHS is willing to go beyond to see it move and evolve as a franchise, and I think that that's fascinating. Well, I said previously with the wraparound segment, it is showing VHS as a franchise, and especially using its mimetic and meta context to kind of show what found footage is and could be. I think having someone like Mike Flanagan and a lot of the great directors and writers in this, that it is showing how VHS can move as a franchise that is focused almost entirely on genre rather than just trying to scare the shit out of people. I think there is something that Mike Flanagan, who if you don't know is a fantastic horror filmmaker, I really love some of his work, especially the likes of Midnight Mass, which I think is one of the best series maybe of the past 5-10 years. He wrote this segment when it was directed by his wife, Kate Siegel, who has only written one other thing, the horror film Hush, which I haven't seen, but this is the first thing she's fully directed, and it's brilliant. I think it's amazing. It is such a wonderfully told story that once it focuses purely on Hallie and casts off its shackles and casts off into space, it does feel like it could go anywhere. There are a few moments where I was like, oh, I could kind of see this happening and that happening, blah, blah, blah. But I have to say, it took me to a place that I've never really thought of in regards to horror, especially cosmic horror, and it comes through so well in the writing and especially in the performances. I have to really commend Pierce, who I haven't really seen as an actor. I know that she's a voice actor, and obviously she's been a writer for Santa Monica Studios, and she's done voice acting in franchises that I'm not a huge fan of, but I'm aware she's very good at that. She really sounds like this wayward mother who's from somewhere in the US, and she has no idea what the fuck she's doing. She's so out of her depth emotionally and then physically. And I think that, look, for people who don't know, Pierce is a native Australian. She was born in Queensland, I think. And I was listening so heavily to how she spoke both in front of and behind the camera to see if she just slipped back into that Aussie accent. And I don't really think it happens once. Again, I was listening to it while I was editing, and even when she's panicking and freaking out on the ship, she doesn't have that Aussie twang, and I think she does an amazing job. I really love how bad this segment turns, because it's so preoccupied with truth and discovery and proving people wrong that it gets caught up in its own mystery. Hallie does, and I think when reality sets in, it's just too late. And you feel this tension and regret in her voice, and it's heartbreaking, and I love it. I don't really think we've seen this outcome in a VHS segment before, and I really like it. I think that there's so much to be said about how visually stripped down and how bare this story is, because it doesn't have a lot going for it, but the ending of it and how it's really focused on this one character, it just bumps up that existential, cosmic, and eventually body horror that I frankly, I can't get out of my head. I only watched this, you know, a couple of minutes ago. Like, I finished it and I was like, okay, I gotta get to right into this. This one, and obviously our next segment, it's just gonna stick with me. I know this is gonna stick with me, and it's probably gonna be pretty high on my list next year when I do another franchise wrap up. Also, I could be totally wrong, but I think the creature at the end of the wraparound is Hallie fully evolved. And again, I could be totally wrong, and maybe I'm reading into it too much because the segments are, honestly, both endings are only 8 minutes apart, and it added a little bit to my enjoyment of the ending. I feel like with what Hallie goes through in those last 5 minutes is so intense, and I feel like hasn't really been explored in horror, in sci-fi. I can only really think of maybe Event Horizon kind of has something similar, but even then, that's more about hell and faith rather than sci-fi purely. Anyway, well, there's 2 bits of acting that I really hated, and I'm not going to point out because they would just be cruel. I just feel like this is the most sci-fi out of all of the segments, and I think it's really a fascinating look into what VHS can be.
continuity moving forward. It is still scary, it is still haunting, and it is still amazing. I loved it. I really liked it. I mean, I do think that sometimes it does kind of focus a little bit too much on the CG elements once we get on the ship. I think it's weird, and it's wonderful, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. And I always love when people bring up nanomachines.
Nanomachines, son!
Look, it's great. It's a great segment. I really liked it, and I give Stowaway an 8 out of 10. Number 1, Live and Let Dive. My God in heaven. This is one of the best segments ever. And I know I say that every year because there's one that's my favorite, but holy shit. Justin Martinez and Ben Turner knocked this so far out of the park. You're never ever gonna see that baseball ever again. I just love this. I really fucking love this. As someone, as I mentioned before, who's got a fear of heights and aliens, I felt like this was gonna fuck me up so bad. To give a tiny bit of context, for anyone who didn't watch it and is like, I love watching this guy's reviews, I might as well just watch this instead of the full film. This is the one segment I have to implore you to watch. Out of all of them, if you're like, I'm a little bit on the fence, this fucking rules. It's about a guy named Zach and his friends, who are all shitty. I fucking hate all of them, with how they act and how they handle the situation. They all decide for his birthday, let's do a skydiving thing. Worst friends, fuck you, I hope you all die. And then aliens come in and just fucking ruin his birthday in the worst way possible. I really, 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 really love this segment from beginning to end. I think it's so well thought out, and I think it's so well done that even though you can see some of the CGing and practical elements not entirely working together, and you can see some of the cuts even though it's trying to be like one full take, I still think it's amazing. I think it's incredible. The tension and escalation goes from 0 to 100 in such a wonderful gradual way that I think it truly may be one of the best VHS segments. Obviously, we'll find out next year on my list. It's such a wonderful thing to see somebody like Justin Martinez, who was originally part of Radio Silence. He was one of the people who helped out with 10/31/98 in the original VHS film, and I think it's fantastic. I also feel like Zach as a character is perfectly directed and perfectly written. I think it's great that his reaction to things is so realistic, and especially somebody who fucking hates heights and would never do any kind of skydiving in his fucking life. I think it's so good to see him go through this very heightened, very absurd situation, and frankly, handle it realistically. He really does love his friends, and he loves his wife or fiance or whatever Jess is, and I think everyone plays it so perfectly. I don't know if they're all professional actors or maybe they are stunt people, but regardless, I think everyone does their job so well. I cannot get over how amazing this segment is. When I finished watching this, my partner went out for brunch. She came back, and I was like, you gotta see this. You gotta see this shit. This is so fucking awesome. And there are so many great jump scares and just reveals in it that I don't want to show them here because I just like, hey, you should watch this. You genuinely should watch this. I think it's fucking great. I think everybody in it is really, really great. And I love the practical effects in here. They're so gory and so brilliant. And while, yeah, I have some negative things to say about the CG, the moment where the plane hits the UFO and the entire thing explodes and everyone's falling out of the sky, it's brilliant. It's shit that I've never seen before, and it's obviously is very similar to this viral video from a couple years ago, and I thought like, oh, maybe that's what it's gonna be, and they'll recreate it, and it'll be cool. To be like, okay, what if instead of hitting another plane, which is fucking terrifying in the first place, it hits a fucking UFO, and then the fucking creatures in the UFO are pissed, and they hunt your fucking friends down? I love it. I love it so much. And just like this little inclusion of the military jets, like they're trying to like find and fight the UFOs, so good. And again, it's about that heightening and that escalation. And I do like the design of the creature. The CG aliens aren't super great, and I do love this moment here where they clearly had like a physical, practical version of the aliens and they just threw it at the camera. And I just love it. I really, 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 really love it so much. Zach's no good, very bad birthday smash is fantastic. And also, it has two of the best jump scares in the entire film that, again, I'm not going to spoil here. I hope you get spooked. It's great. I really love it. It all works together. It is the best segment of VHS Beyond. It is Live and Let Dive, and I'm giving this one a 9.5 out of 10. It has a better ending than Alien Slumber Party. It has a better ending than most of the segments in VHS Beyond. It is fantastic. It's great, and I can't stop gushing about it. It's so fucking good. And that's it. Here are the full rankings here. If you just wanted to skip to this part and you're just like, where are these things ranked? If you're curious about what I'd give the whole movie, I think it's a solid 7 out of 10. It's not as creative or as groundbreaking as VHS 85. It is moving into a new direction, but it does feel like it has the exact same framework as VHS 85, especially with the way that they integrate the wraparound segment a lot better. I still think it's a solid entry overall, with definitely Live and Let Dive being the highlight. Holy shit! It's going to be exciting to see where these segments rank on my 2025 list, and hopefully they have another one coming out soon. At the time of recording, there hasn't been any announcement. It's obviously been only a few days since the movie came out and I had time to watch it, but I do think that with Beyond going so hard with the sci-fi elements, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to be genre-specific sequels in the future, or maybe VHS Beyond is going to be its own spin-off. I wouldn't be against that, but it'll be definitely interesting to see who they bring onto the next entry and how they'll try and top themselves. I definitely see that with like bottom-of-the-barrel segments like Stalk are obviously a huge contrast compared to Live and Let Dive and Stowaway. I still think that it's definitely moving the entire franchise forward, and I think it's fantastic knowing that they're not really running out of ideas. I think it's really, really great. Well, yes, I have obviously updated my ranking list, which you can see here. It's not as good as last year's segment, but I like where I've sandwiched it in there. But I want to thank a lot of the people who have been coming and following me on Letterboxd. I don't promote it a lot. I hate promoting stuff. I hate when I put this video out, I have to put it in a whole bunch of places that, frankly, I feel like people hate me when I talk about what I do with these things. And obviously, it's become a yearly tradition. I like doing it. I like the writing process. I like how it makes me feel about horror in general. I do think that I appreciate everybody who checks out my Letterboxd. It is here. It is letterboxd.com/SpyroGyro. And if you want to support the channel, please do consider spending a tiny bit of money on Patreon at patreon.com/HelpHarrison. I'm already in pre-production on my next film franchise video, which is about the Wishmaster franchise, which I'm not... I'm still working through the films because I got the Blu-ray release for Wishmaster and I'm trying to listen to the audio commentaries because I want to get most out of the experience as possible. But I do want to give a shout out to my Patreon subscribers already, and a special thanks to everyone who makes this video possible. You're all wonderful and I love you very much, and thank you for giving me the time and space to do all this stuff. I cannot wait for the next VHS film, and I can't wait to put out my next video, which again will very likely be on the Wishmaster franchise. I will review all 4 films and I will rank them as well as the wishes. That's going to be a fun part. I do think that I'll make sure that, you know, with something like this, if you do subscribe on my Patreon, you'll get my notes, the notes that I put together for this video, which I think is really, really fun as well. Anyway, I'll have more updates soon on my Patreon and on my YouTube channel. Please do like and subscribe if you want to. I hate that I have to put this little thing in there, but I don't know, it helps apparently. Some people come back after they subscribe, and I hope that's you. I hope you watched this and you thought it was awesome. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you go and watch VHS Beyond on Shudder, and you just have a great day. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and stay safe and stay spooky.